Craig Johnson, and I do a few different things. I'm a Chief Operating Officer over at Heather Doyle. I also teach at a couple universities, and I do private practice work as well. Yeah, the thing that drew me to addiction counseling years ago, I think I got out of college and I was just sort of looking to kind of help people generally. Ended up landing in an alcohol prevention treatment program. And then actually a while after that got sober myself, which is kind of not the way you're supposed to do to do these things. But we always joke, tongue in cheek. A lot of people with addiction issues, we're not real good at doing things the right way anyway. So it is what it is. But and that I think that, as well as just finding some success and a lot of meaningful experiences in the field, have sort of kept me around. Yeah, I'm Craig Johnson. I'm a Chief Operating Officer at Heather Doyle, which is one of the outpatient programs in town. I also do private practice work at Mind Evolution, and I teach. The teaching I do currently is at MCC. I teach a specialty course on jail and prison reentry. Again, a licensed mental health counselor, credentialed alcoholism substance abuse counselor. And I'm involved in a lot of different consortiums and different groups, including the Opiate Task Force. I think that's the topic of the focus here, and so that's a highly relevant group. With the County Advisory Group on Substance Abuse Issues, involved with the Region 2 Consortium on Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services, which is pretty much everybody involved in treatment and prevention in the area.
And C.A.S.A.C.
Yeah, pardon me?
And C.A.S.A.C.
And the C.A.S.A.C, yep. Mm-hmm. C.A.S.A.C stands for Credentialed Alcohol and Substance Abuse Counselor.
Okay. And
yeah, Heather Doyle is, there are about 8 or 10 outpatient programs in town. Outpatient is where people, of course, get services while they remain at home and in the community, come in for groups or individual work or what have you. Heather Doyle is kind of a medium-sized group, has been around a number of years, centrally located, and do a number of different treatment and case management service activities, including a real emphasis on medication-assisted treatment as well. Sure. The Consortium of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services of Region 2. Region 2 covers kind of the Rochester and a bit east and south to the border. Okay. It's a group that's comprised of a number of the treatment, prevention organizations and others that are involved in this work and interest in this area. I'm the past president of the Region 2 group. The current president is Patrick Sesh over at Strong. But I'm involved with the executive committee and very invested in the work of this group. We do advocacy, professional education, a bit of sharing in terms of updates on everything from regulations to themes as to what works best with helping folks. Well, in working with youth and treating substance abuse, obviously there are a number of challenges because young people are kind of complex. But I'd start with this, that is sort of an interesting take in this whole arena. Addiction is a pediatric illness. So if you think about that, we talk about chemical dependency and addiction as illnesses, as diseases. A pediatric illness, meaning that for most, not for all, but for most, that onset, progression of the illness, increasing symptoms, and reaching a point actually where a diagnosis can be made of a substance use disorder typically happens before the age of 18. Now that may evolve subsequent to that, may move from cannabis to alcohol or from alcohol to cocaine or what have you, as people are over the age of 18, of course. But the onset and progression typically occurs while people are very young. Now, having said that, treating young people, of course, adds a number of additional complexities because you can have young people that have any number of learning issues, attending issues, concurrent challenges in the family and with stability. And we know adolescence is a time where there's a lot of emotional and social challenges and turmoil anyway. Now, when you throw major mood-altering substances into that mix, that can be for many young people sort of like gasoline on the fire. So that's just a bit of how it's very challenging working with young people.
Are you seeing an increase?
In terms of the patterns of mental illness and substance abuse with young people, I don't know that we're seeing much of an increase. We're seeing trending. People don't realize maybe that substance use patterns tend to trend. Some things get popular, and certainly one that's very popular now is vaping. Okay, a few years ago, it just was, or vaping maybe was used for people who had a long history of smoking cigarettes, typically adults, to cut down and quit cigarettes, right? Well, vaping has become certainly very much a drug of onset for young people. So we're seeing an increase in vaping, yes. Seeing an increase in cannabis, a lot of changing attitudes and a lot that is the result of not having good research on cannabis and the talk about legalization. So those are some increases. We're seeing some slight decreases, it seems, in cigarette smoking. That's a good thing. Pretty stable in terms of the number of young people using alcohol, which of course is not a good thing. But we're not seeing a lot of trending there. Don't see a lot of use of opiates with folks under the age of 18. Now, once people hit kind of 18 or 19, that has obviously trended up substantially over the last years in terms of opiates. Yeah, as far as working with the criminal justice population, that too adds a number of challenges. In our community, we have a lot of different alternatives to incarceration, so that's really a good thing. So whether it's a drug court or a mental health court or probation or parole, these are all ways that people can not be in jail, at least for a period of time, and have some sort of a supervision that hopefully compels them to get the help that they need. That's the premise of a lot of these programs. So many referrals are made by these criminal justice entities to treatment centers like Hugh Doyle and others in the community so that people can get help instead of just being punished. Now, working with people who are also involved in the criminal justice population is it varies a lot. There's some people who, as we describe, are at the light end of criminal justice, let's say. It's their first petty larceny. They were under the influence of alcohol when they stole the sweater from the store. And so they're in criminal justice system, but at the very light end maybe, or a young person with criminal possession of marijuana, they're entering into the criminal justice system by virtue of those charges. But we'd very much, in most cases, like to get them diverted to treatment and to help. Now, of course, as you go down, there are people that have a DWI or a couple DWIs or more serious charges, excuse me, charges that may be violent, and then ultimately at the far end, I guess, if you will, of the criminal justice system, folks that are getting out of prison, getting out of jail. And we describe that as reentry. And that's I've done a lot of work with jail and prison reentry, the adjustment of people coming back to our community from a period of incarceration. At the local jail, in terms of the treatment beds, at one point we were up to actually over 200 treatment beds at the Monroe Correctional Facility. It was a benchmark program. I worked with that program, developed that program actually, and helped a lot of people getting stabilized in the jail setting, and then of course the reentry back to the community, where they're typically going to live next door to you and me, and how are things going to go at that point is a critical question. Currently, the jail count is down. There are not as many people in the local jail. That's a good thing, we think, in many ways certainly. And there are some programs. In fact, one of the upgrades that's been done in the last little while is the medication assisted program in the jail, which helps along with the talk therapy and the treatment and and the resources and these kinds of things, that people can get medications that may help them to maintain their sobriety when they leave. It's a very good question in terms of being what's perceived as the lack of beds in the community, and yet there are beds in jail. Might people kind of get arrested to get treatment, or might, a judge sentence somebody to jail so that they can get treatment? if they perceive that there aren't beds in the community. We thought that might be the case initially, that there might have been, and we don't want to see that. You don't want to see somebody go to jail just to get treatment. We'd rather have them get treatment in the community, of course. But we thought, I know, at the beginning of the jail program that something like that might occur. It turned out really not to be the case. In terms of the belief that that we're short on beds in the community, that's one that there's a lot of discussion about, and valuable discussion, because there are some folks who have not been able to access treatment. Family members are very concerned that when someone's ready to go, the bed needs to be available, and it does. They're right. On the other hand, there are times when there are some beds available in the community. So we are in a very active dialogue, we being the professionals and the recovery groups in the community and so on, active dialogue in terms of better identifying just what's available and what's not in the community. Yes, with the Opiate Task Force, I'm involved as a member of that group. Jennifer Farringer over at DePaul, NCADD, is the one who chairs and coordinates that, has done, I think, a wonderful job for the last couple of years. It is a bit of a who's who in that we have law enforcement representatives and treatment folks and peers and community agencies and medical personnel. It really is a nice mix of different people and representation, which is what's needed. There's not one single group of people or entity that is going to be able to really tackle this opiate issue. So we meet every couple months, and then there are other interim meetings and communication certainly as part of that to update on trends, programs that are available, services that may be coming online, changes and updates, a little bit of best practice discussion, and looking at some of the data and how well we're doing and trying to map that in our community. Somewhat. There are, yes, in terms of the different populations, there are a number of different populations. Certainly one that jumps out in the Rochester area are the folks living in poverty, right? We have a childhood poverty rate well over 50%. There are kids out here that are not eating well or enough, and certainly their adult counterparts. And when you look at the added devastation of addiction issues in the context of some of our inner city and impoverished areas, it becomes virtually catastrophic. In fact, typically when we see the homicides and the violence, it's often, very often, drug-related in terms of territory and people infringing, which is another interesting side with that population in particular, is not just the drug use and potentially abuse and addiction, but the money. That's a whole side of this we don't talk as much about in terms of the finances and the impact on the urban economy from drug money. Because a whole lot of the money that's involved with drugs is not money that comes from the city. It's money that comes from other places and comes into the city, the urban economy, into the Rochester economy. But that's just one part of it. That's just one population. We also can talk about certainly youth as a special focus population with some particular dynamics in terms of why kids use and the systems that are developed, and some that could be probably improved in working with young people, with individuals who identify as gay, lesbian, transgender. There are, needless to say, some challenges. We see a higher prevalence of substance abuse in that group of individuals typically. And I think if we did a deeper exploration, if we had time, we could talk a bit as to why in terms of levels of homelessness, potentially rejection from family and other supports, isolation, sometimes what we call an internal dissonance, which is that internal conflict. Another group of people that, there are many, but another group that's worthy of mention are the deaf and hard of hearing in the Rochester area. And here again, we see a greater than average number of individuals in that population that become quite involved with substances. We do have a couple of specialized responses out at RIT. There's a group, the Substance Abuse and Intervention Services for the Deaf, which is housed at RIT but serves the community, the deaf and hard of hearing community. And even Norris Clinic, our inpatient program, state-run program in town, has some beds that are reserved for individuals that are deaf or hard of hearing. So those are just a few of the populations that certainly we see that have some special challenges. Question, have I seen mistreatment in facilities? Rarely. And there are mechanisms for reporting, and I have been involved in my career in the past with reporting times that there have been suspected mistreatment, maltreatment, or inappropriate addressing of people. Although I'm guessing with this individual, some of what is it she now? Is he now? Some of what he may have experienced is really a lack of understanding and a lack of people that are working that don't know that experience or that culture well. And I'm not making excuses, but more the compelling need for the professionals and others to understand the experiences, the challenges, and so on of transgender in this individual's situation. I'm not surprised that he perceived and perhaps truly experienced some misunderstanding and even being ostracized or put down or verbally abused or whatever form that might have taken. That does not totally surprise me. We hope that doesn't happen. We hope that staff or continue to become more culturally sensitive and competent in their work with all different groups of people and populations. Well, in any of the treatment centers that are licensed, there are mechanisms for reporting complaints or again, any questions around abuse or unethical behavior or mistreatment or violations of confidentiality, for that matter. So there are channels that just about everybody that walks into a treatment center, everybody should see, and they're posted on the wall. Patient rights that are posted that usually give talk to the supervisor or talk to the director. You can go directly to the New York State Office of Alcoholism if that's who's overseeing that particular facility. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that getting a case manager can be very helpful for people or a peer as an advocate. And probably, more than any other group in town, Trillium, is the one that's seen as a place where people that are transgender, gay, lesbian, can be very much understood and find an advocate and find a voice. So I'd recommend some conversations with the good folks at Trillium for somebody who may find themselves in that situation if they're feeling like the treatment center is not responding well to their needs. In terms of the links between mental health and addictions, this can be kind of complex, but very important. It's what some of us work with virtually every day. Put very simply, there are some people that have some pre-existing mental health conditions. Depression, anxiety, ADHD are a few of the common ones, trauma experiences. And as a result of those symptoms, they may attempt to self-medicate with the use of street drugs, substances anywhere from alcohol to marijuana to opiates to amphetamines. On the other hand, there are folks that when they're younger don't really have any identified mental health issues, nothing really notable other than being an uncomfortable teenager, and that's just about every teenager. And they may start using substances, and for any number of reasons develop a dependency, develop an addiction. And then, of course, over time, the addiction begins to take its toll. And what we can see after a period of time is what we call a substance-induced mental illness. So somebody could have a substance-induced depression, a substance-induced psychosis. And in fact, in some of the states where cannabis has been legalized, we're seeing substantial increases in emergency room admissions for cannabis-induced psychosis, as an example. So those are some of the complexities. It can kind of be the mental health issues, if you will, leading to high levels of substance abuse. It can be the other way around, or we're complex creatures. It can be a little of both. You can have some soft symptoms of depression, and you can start to use a drug that might accentuate those symptoms over time. So you use other substances and so on. And so people often will be suffering from what we call co-occurring substance use and mental health conditions.
What are some changes?
In terms of the opioid epidemic over the last couple of years, it's been a bit of a fooler. Most substances kind of trend up, trend down. Even some of our long-standing embedded substances like nicotine, certainly over the course of not a few years, over the course of virtually a generation, we've seen substantial decreases in the number of people smoking cigarettes, for instance. The bath salts, K2, the synthetics, had a very quick shelf life, about a year and a half or so. Nobody heard of them. And then a fairly good number of young people were using them, and then they sort of went away. Now they're back a little bit now as a way that some people try to add to the other substances they're using. But that one had a fairly quick increase and then decrease. Well, we thought when we started to see some of the rapid increase in the numbers of people in our area and beyond who were using heroin and oxycodone and related pills, we thought that this would be another sort of briefer trend. When it started to go from year 2 to year 3 to year 4 to year 5 and so on, we of course have become very concerned from the beginning, but this had not trended down. Now we hope that this year, for the first time, we're seeing a bit of a trending down in the death rate. I mean, don't know if that's in the prevalence of the use. It's still kind of early in terms of data and how much of that is attributable. We know some of it's attributable to the saves of Narcan, because a lot of people are trained on Narcan, thank God. So we're not entirely sure, but that's we had seen this substantial increase going back a few years in opiate use. We've seen it morph because the oxycodone was less available by prescription and therefore on the streets. Heroin cheaper, more available. So we saw this morphing more to heroin. And then, of course, in the last few years, the many of the fatalities and overdoses linked to fentanyl, which is synthetic, very strong, very powerful. And that's been the theme for the last few years, and the bulk of the devastation that we see is in relation to the fentanyl. In terms of New York adapting the C.A.S.A.C law, I'm not sure. We're seeing all kinds of changes, aren't we, at the state level in terms of cannabis? It's going to be legal. It's not. These kinds of things. There are a number of proposals out there, but I'm not sure where the state is going to go on some of these things at this point.
From your experiences, you can only keep them there for 72 hours or something?
Right. Unless there's a determination that they continue to be in need of substantial treatment, and in regards to something like that, like C.A.S.A.C law in New York State, I don't know. Personally, I'm doubtful that would happen, because there's such an advocacy for people's rights and for autonomy. I don't know. I don't know. It's one that I'll tell you, it hasn't really hit the radar a lot for people doing treatment work. I'm not hearing a lot of discussion around that, so I don't know how active it is at the legislative level. Okay, some of the best ways to overcome addiction. We today talk an awful lot about multiple pathways to recovery. So I'm one that's, and there are others like me who are not so quick to throw out the 12 steps. That's a pathway. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Heroin Anonymous in our community, and are very strong programs, and many, many thousands of people are virtually alive today and sober because of self-help programs of that nature. We have support groups and others like Celebrate Recovery, housed typically in religious in faith organizations. We have Smart Recovery and some others that are good mutual support groups. Some people find sobriety through any number of these groups. On the other hand, many people find success through going to treatment. We have a well-developed inpatient, detox, outpatient, community residence, supportive living series of programs in our community and throughout New York State. Some people can find success through private counseling, therapy, psychiatry. It does happen. That helps them get to the root of some of the issues, if you will. Some people really can find success with the help of medications. And here we're not just replacing one drug with another. There's a whole understanding around using medications, some of which have no effect other than reducing the urges and cravings that someone might have. And that kind of assist in the beginning is great. Or in the case of naltrexone or Vivitrol, that's kind of a miracle drug that people can take that orally or inject it or be injected. And if they use heroin, they don't get high. That's a miracle drug, and it also reduces a lot of the urges and cravings for alcohol for those individuals as well. So any of those things are reasonable pathways to recovery today. In terms of what's not working in the response to substance abuse issues, well, you'd mentioned one, if they're a lack of access. And we've made a lot of improvements, but it is one of those conditions that when someone's ready, they really need to get the access quickly and effectively. We still have breaches in the systems. What I mean by that, somebody might go into a detox, let's say, for 5 or 6 days. Now they're medically more stable, they're drug-free, but they can't get into the next level of care. These are the kinds of things I'm more aware of in terms of what doesn't work. I wouldn't really point to any one program or type of approach and say, oh, that doesn't work. There are reasonably good successes for all of those different pathways that I mentioned. Some people do fine on outpatient or with mutual help groups. Others need a residential program that's longer term that helps them work on certain character issues and make a better adjustment back to their community.
What can the city provide?
In terms of ways that people can help, I think just being more involved. We do have some decent involvement, but we need to keep up the momentum. This is not something that you do once. It's not, okay, good, we did this effort and we've taken care of our drug problem. It really needs to be sustained. In terms of some of our outreach groups and the peer and the support programs and so on, in terms of access to treatment. What people can do is get involved, and there's a tremendous amount of work to be done and people to be helped, whether it's cleaning, picking up needles, whether it's educating, whether it's talking with your kids in your own living room about some of these related issues. Whether it's for some people developing themselves as a professional or somebody who could be helpful to folks with substance use conditions.
Is there any legislation?
Any legislation that I would like to see passed? We've had for years, we being again the treatment and prevention community, an alcohol tax that would be devoted to treatment and prevention, be a dedicated tax. We could suggest the same kind of thing around cigarettes. Now, they're highly taxed already. I understand that, and that's for good reason, a lot of people would believe. So some of those taxes, I think, are important. We've even talked about a dedicated gambling tax, with all the casinos, that may be something that would be very helpful to fund treatment and prevention in the gambling area as well. Beyond that, in terms of specific legislation, certainly some of the hottest issues are around cannabis. And by and large, it's pretty clear that the medical field, the treatment community, and beyond are against smokable cannabis. It's carcinogen. There's no other, medicine that you smoke. But it seems like in terms of other forms of ingestion of THC, that we really need a lot more research. Even though it's been around a long time, longer than humans probably in North America, the hemp plant, but we don't have good research for a lot of kind of archaic reasons. Today we're seeing CBD kind of all over the place, and there's not good research on that. It certainly is distinctly different from THC. But in terms of legislation, those are things we certainly would want to take a deeper look at.
Do you think marijuana is the gateway?
No. I don't like the term gateway for an addictive substance. Okay, so to say that nicotine is a gateway drug, no. Nicotine is a highly addictive substance in and of itself. The problem with nicotine is not that it leads to cocaine. The problem with nicotine is nicotine. Alcohol is a gateway drug, or cannabis is a gateway drug. Cannabis is an addictive drug. Does everybody get addicted? No. Do some people? Yes. THC I'm talking about in particular here. And so the issue with cannabis is not that it's a gateway drug to cocaine or heroin, or the issue with cannabis is cannabis, that it can destroy people's lives in different ways, more subtly and more quietly. But for some people, not for everybody by any means, but for some people, a cannabis use disorder can be very significant and harmful.
What would you say?
In terms of somebody who is in active addiction, I would suggest that they get some help. There really are tremendous resources, whether it's walking in to any number of clinics in the daytime where you can be seen pretty much on the spot, same day, within an hour or two. Whether it's walking into one of the outreach centers, the Gates to Recovery or the Find Your Path, or some of these folks that are largely peer-staffed organizations, to just talk to somebody. Because if I have a problem with alcohol or opiates or any drug, I'm not real apt to just walk in and say, hey, I need help and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And for the most part, there's a lot of reluctance and trepidation and fear around that kind of thing. So to try to find the supports, and if it's just a matter of having a conversation so that you can start to crack the door open a little bit to the prospects of hope and change and recovery, that really is what we would encourage people to do. Start talking about it. Avail yourself of some of the resources that are here. If I was talking to a mother or father or any family member of someone in active addiction, I would say first, get some help for yourself. It can be a traumatic experience. It can be a lonely experience. It can be a very scary experience for family members, and probably in particular if you're a parent. There's a special thing when it's your child that develops this condition. But the place to start is to get some help for yourself. Talk to somebody, get some advice. Usually by the time things evolve, parents have tried everything at their disposal. And similarly to the suggestion for people that may have a problem themselves, to seek some outside help, whether that's Al-Anon or Nar-Anon, that are support groups for parents, whether that's coming into one of the clinics or a private therapist that knows about family addiction issues, and get some help for yourself. We often equate it to the airplanes. If the plane is in trouble, the mask comes down, and you know what they instruct you to do, right? The parents to do it first before they give it to their kid. And it's that kind of thing for parents to do what they can. There's a window of opportunity that significant others have. What I mean by that, there's a lot you can't do. You can't chain your kid down, and keep them from doing drugs or whatever. And there's, a few things you can do, and sort of that window of opportunity there as to what is the most effective, not guaranteed, but what's the most effective for encouraging someone with an addiction issue to get some help.
Are you a licensed family therapist?
I'm a licensed mental health counselor. There are licensed marriage and family therapists in the state of New York. There are only a few of them around, though. So,
what would you recommend?
Yeah, if there was a parent or family member with kids going through things, would definitely recommend that they find somebody who specializes in that. There is not enough, this is the thing that a few of us in the field have been trying to do, there's not enough emphasis on family at some of our treatment centers. I think that's a shortcoming. So some of us are trying to increase the training and the emphasis on family systems, and that includes helping family members not only identify some of the things that they can and can't do in terms of being effective with the person and with their loved one, but what they can and can't do for themselves as well.
What would you say?
If there is a family member, or mother or father that has lost their child to addiction, I would encourage them to get in touch with one of our key groups. S.A.S.A.C is one you may have interviewed. They do a bereavement group. At Huther Doyle, we have, for a few years now, also operated a bereavement group for parents and family members that have lost a loved one. We have some special events. SOARS does the Overdose Day at the end of August. There are a couple other events that are there to provide general support, but also, in some cases, actually specific support groups for family members that may have lost a loved one. The Recovery Fitness Walk that comes up in September, they typically have little signs along the side of the road that have been placed there by family members with pictures or inscriptions of loved ones who have died as a result of this disease. And I know when I was there last year, I saw somebody that I had worked with, and I didn't know what happened to her. And to see her face show up on one of those signs as I was kind of walking up the road was a profound, sad, painful kind of experience. And it's hard to go through that. And I was the professional in that capacity, For family members, of course, it's just geometrically that much more painful. And to go through that alone, to go through that with all kinds of questions, to go through that being plagued by the belief that I should have known or I should have done more is torture. So seek some of the support. There are all kinds of groups and even more private settings. Not everybody wants to just walk into a group when you've lost a loved one like that. But seek out at least a private setting where you can find some assistance, some understanding, and work through the bereavement process.
Are there any last words of encouragement?
Okay, in terms of any kind of final thoughts, is that recovery is possible. Very possible. I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. I have family members in recovery. I've also lost a number of people to this disease. There are reported to be over 23 million people in recovery. Some have done it through church or religion. Many have done it through Alcoholics Anonymous and similar 12-step groups. Many have gone through inpatient or outpatient treatment centers and so on. So recovery is possible. Recovery is worth it. One of the things that I have it written on my board over there, sobriety has its own rewards. And like any kind of change, it's hard. And usually it gets worse before it ges better, as you can imagine. But with the support and the help and the treatment if needed and the encouragement, sobriety is possible, is critical for some of us, and opens up a whole new chapter.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Craig. I really
Okay. Absolutely.